Adventure in Bear Valley, written by Marlene Perez, illustrated by David Cockcroft. Focus question: what information in the text helps readers better understand the characters? Words to know: agonizingly, apprentice, between hay, blow up, bosh, bully, canteens, dragged out, flapjacks, horse, hold a candle, homestead, kin, pallet, perilous, peter out, perplexed, provisions, tied to, timid. Going to California sure sounded like a grand idea when mind power alive, Emily said in a low voice, the hush of the dark woods sending shivers down her spine. Emily's brother, yes, glanced warily at her as she picked up branches of firewood. When Mine Pa died, we didn't have any choice but to continue heading west. Like many pioneers, their parents had died on the perilous trail to California, and the Hutchinsons, a young pioneering couple, had taken them in. The four of them had traveled for days through the grandest, greenest mountains they had ever seen. They finally set up camp somewhere on the western slopes in California, just as the sun's rays faded from the horizon of the late September sky. Did you hear that? Emily whispered urgently to Jess. Let's head back. I don't like it out here, pleaded Emily as the shadows grew long and the forest turned dark as midnight. Afraid of some oil boogeyman? Jess teased gently. Well, I think we've got plenty of firewood anyway. Let's get out of here. Walking back to camp, Emily couldn't help glancing over her shoulder every few steps. Just in time, Mr. Hutchinson said with a smile as they returned to camp. I think the fire was about to peter out. Yes scowled. It was just a harmless remark, but lately Yes was like a bear and a sore head around Mr. Hutchinson. Emily, Mrs. Hutchinson's voice interrupted her thoughts. Would you help me bake some biscuits? I'll be glad to, Emily said. She walked over to the covered wagon. It stored everything they'd owned beneath its rounded canvas cover. Emily fetched the heavy iron skillet Mrs. Hutchinson used to make their meals. Campfire biscuits again, Jess said. I'll give anything for a heaping plate of Ma's biscuits. Emily knew what he meant was that he would give everything to have Ma back again. Emily looked at Mr. and Mrs. Hutchinson. They both winced when Yes mentioned the biscuits. She hoped they didn't think Yes was criticizing Mrs. Hutchinson's cooking. Emily, when we get to Bear Valley, Mrs. Hutchinson said, could you show me how to make your mom's recipe for biscuits? I'm sure mine don't hold a candle to hers. Before Emily could answer, Mr. Hutchinson said, I have good news for you. We just entered Bear Valley. We should be at your brother's homestead in a couple of days. Why do they call it Bear Valley? Emily asked. Mrs. Hutchinson gave her husband a look that said, "Don't answer that," but he ignored it. "The children need to know the dangers in this wilderness, Elizabeth," he said to his wife. He explained, "There are bears in these woods, big black bears, bigger grizzly bears, and even mountain lions. You need to be careful and don't wander into the woods alone." That night, Emily fell asleep quickly, dragged out by traveling and chores. She tossed and turned throughout the night as she dreamed of strange forest creatures. The next morning, Emily awoke early to find a light frost had blanketed, blanketed the ground. "I'll make flapjacks," she said to herself, wanting to surprise Jess and the Hutchinsons. Emily rebraided her hair as the sun peeked over the mountains, burning off the frost. Emily was dying to change into a clean, crisp dress like her mother laid out for her on Sundays, but she would have to wait until they reached the homestead. The campfire sputtered, the flames all but dead. Emily leaned over, intending to shake her brother awake to collect wood, but Yes looked so peaceful. So peaceful, she couldn't bring herself to wake him. She wrapped up in a blanket and headed into the woods. Just then, Yes leaped from behind a giant spruce tree, wearing a big grin. Emily started, "I should feed you bark and dirt for that, Bosh." Yes at work. Yes tried unsuccessfully to stifle his laughter. "I was going to make you Ma's recipe for flapjacks," Emily taunted. "Now I've got second thoughts." Yes nodded and applauded. "Hold your horses. I was just joking. You know I love Ma's flapjacks." Yes took some of the wood from Emily as she pinched his arm. Teasing like this made Jess's troubled face look almost happy. When they returned, Mr. Hutchinson smiled, and Emily smiled back. Jess flinched. Mr. Hutchinson was feeding the oxen. It was Jess's job to feed the animals in the morning, and he thought Mr. Hutchinson might have a blow-up. But Mr. Hutchinson held his tongue if he was angry. "I'm making flapjacks," Emily explained. Mr. Hutchinson grinned. "As Elizabeth loves flapjacks," he said, "and so do I. I'll stay here and care for her," Emily volunteered, hoping to give Jess and Mr. Hutchinson much needed time together. Mr. Hutchinson reluctantly agreed and gathered the canteens while Jess got the fishing gear. Emily checked on Mrs. Hutchinson, who was awake and lying under a pile of blankets on a wooden pallet in the wagon. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Hutchinson?" Emily inquired. Mrs. Hutchinson gave her a weak smile. "Please call me Elizabeth," she said. "You and Jess are family now." Emily cautiously smiled back at her, uncertain of what to say. "Would you like a cup of tea? Or maybe some flapjacks?" Emily said. "I covered them with a towel and kept them by the fire. They should still be warm." Elizabeth nodded gratefully. Emily hurried down from the wagon to make the tea and get the flapjacks. As she approached the fire, she stopped dead in her tracks. There in the campsite stood a rather small bear gulping down Elizabeth's flapjacks. Emily's mind raced, but she was frozen to the spot. She stared at the bear for a few agonizingly slow seconds, trying to remember everything her pet had taught her about wild animals. Emily realized the animal must have been attracted to the camp by the smell of the food. She tried to remember everything she had ever been told about bears, but her mind went blank. The young grizzly hadn't noticed her yet, but Emily knew a cub in camp meant the mother was most likely lurking nearby. She needed to get the cub out of here, and fast. But how? Emily backed away slowly. She needed to get back to the wagon before Elizabeth came out to see what was taking so long. Everything inside her wanted to run, but somehow she knew that was the worst thing to do. The bear would probably think of her as fresh food if she ran. She slowly backed away. She froze when the bear cub suddenly lifted its head and sniffed the air, exposing its sharp teeth. Emily didn't move, and the cub went back to foraging for food. Emily had an idea, but she had to get back to the wagon. She forced herself to gingerly walk the last few steps to the wagon and climbed in, breathing hard. Emily, what's wrong? Elizabeth said. Your face is as white as a sheet. There's a bear cub outside, Emily said, and its mom is probably close by. What should we do? Elizabeth said. I have an idea, Emily said as she peeked out of the wagon. What she saw outside made her sick with fear. A second bear had joined the cub, and this one was huge with frighteningly large claws and teeth. Oh no, she breathed, but Elizabeth heard her. What is it? She asked anxiously. The mama bear is here, Emily said. Now I don't know if my idea will work. She knew Mr. Hutchinson and Yes wouldn't be back at camp for hours, and they had the rifle. Emily had promised Mr. Hutchinson that she would take care of Elizabeth. Elizabeth got up from her pallet, pale and shaky, but determined. I'll help. Tell me what you want me to do. Emily said, we'll need the pots and pans. Help me take them down. They lifted the pots and pans down from where they hung on hooks along the wagon's frame. I'm scared, Emily admitted. Elizabeth said, me too, but we can do this together. They smiled wearily at each other. Then, when Elizabeth reached over and gave her a quick hug, Emily felt a warm glow. Now what? Emily said. Now we bang the pots and pans as loudly as we can. Emily said, my pa told me once that bears don't like loud noises. On the count of 3, 1, 2, 3. They beat the pots and pans loudly. They beat the pots and pans loudly and yelled until they were hoarse. Finally, they stopped, exhausted. Emily and Elizabeth peeked out of the wagon at the quiet campsite. I don't see anything, do you? Elizabeth asked. Emily answered, no, I think they're gone. The two of them remained in the wagon for a long time after that just to be sure, but there was no sign of the bears. Finally, Emily said, would you like a cup of tea now? Yes, please, but I think I'll skip the flapjacks. They looked at each other and collapsed into gales of laughter, relieved that the danger had passed. They left the protection of the wagon, confident that they had chased the bears away. Wait, Emily said. She ran to the wagon and came back carrying pots and pans, just in case, she said, handing two pans to Elizabeth. Suddenly they heard a twig snap and a sound coming toward them. They screamed as loudly as they could and banged on their pots and pans. When Mr. Hutchinson and Jess walked into view, they were carrying fishing poles and a line of trout. They also had perplexed looks on their faces. Elizabeth, what in the world are you doing up? Mr. Hutchinson asked. What's going on? Jess asked. Emily, are you all right? We thought you were the bears, Emily explained. Oh, that's rich, Em, Jess said, not believing bears had come and he had missed it. No, it's true. We had a bit of a fuss with a mother and her cub, Mrs. Hutchinson replied. What mother and cub? Mr. Hutchinson worriedly asked. Elizabeth and Emily shared the rest of their dreadfully exciting adventure as Jess and Mr. Hutchinson admired their bravery. Glossary: agonizingly, drawn out, painfully. Apprentice: person learning a trade from a skilled worker. Between hay, slang for not a boy, but not quite and grass man. Half grown. Blow up, slang for fit of anger. Bosh, slang for nonsense. Bully, exceptionally good, outstanding. Canteens, small containers to carry liquids. Dragged out, slang for worn out or tired. Flapjacks, slang for pancakes. Horse, having a rough voice. Hold a candle, inferior compared to another. Homestead, house and the land around it. Kin, a person's relatives. Pallet, a temporary bed, typically made of straw, placed on the floor. Perilous, dangerous, peer out, to die out. Perplexed, confused. Provisions, supplies. Tie to, slang for rely on. Timid, lacking courage or self confidence.